great hall of Blackwood Keep smelled of roasted venison, pine smoke, and 400 bodies pressed close in celebration. Torches lined the stone walls and iron brackets, their flames bending and straightening with each draft that pushed through from the eastern entrance. The ceiling vaulted 30 feet above the floor. Timber beams dark with age and soot hung with banners that bore the Blackwood sigil, a black wolf on silver field, 7 stars arranged beneath the moon. This was the harvest feast, the night when pact bonds were renewed and alliances reaffirmed through ritual and excess. Long tables of hewn oak stretched the length of the hall, laden with platters of meat still steaming from the spit wheels of cheese, wrapped in cloth bread, torn into hunks and passed hand to hand. Mead flowed from barrels tapped at dawn, and drained by dusk, poured into cups that never stayed empty long. At the head table, elevated on a stone platform, so the assembled could see him clearly, sat Garrick Blackwood. He was 48 years old and had held the title of Alpha for 17 years, ever since his father had fallen during the border wars with the Eastern Pacts. Garrick was tall, broad through the shoulders in the way men who swing swords for decades become broad, with graying hair, cropped short, and a face that carried the particular hardness of someone who had stopped asking himself difficult questions and had started answering them with authority instead. He was speaking now, his voice carrying across the hall without strain, practiced and smooth. This was the part of the feast he enjoyed most, the performance of power, the display of lineage, the public reinforcement of hierarchy. He stood with a cup of mead raised high, firelight catching the gold band on his wrist, the mark of Alpha rank. 7 generations, Garrick said, his voice rolling over the crowd like a wave. 7 unbroken generations of Blackwood Alphas have led this pack. From the first settlement in these mountains, when our ancestors carved this keep from the living stone and claimed these forests as ours by right of strength and blood, the Blackwood line has stood. 400 pack members listened, some with genuine attention, others with the glazed patience of people who had heard this speech in various forms at every feast for the past decade. But they listened because Garrick was Alpha, and listening was what you did when your Alpha spoke. We are not like the southern packs who dilute their blood with alliances of convenience. We are not like the coastal families who marry for trade routes and political favor. We are pure, we are strong, we are a crash, not loud but sharp enough to cut through Garrick's oration. The sound of glass hitting stone, shattering liquid, spreading fast. 400 heads turned. Near the north wall of the great hall, where the servants moved in careful orbits around the edges of the celebration, a young woman knelt on the floor. She was 20 years old, though she looked younger in the shapeless gray dress that hung loose on her thin frame. Her dark hair fell around her shoulders in waves that had once been carefully arranged but had come undone during the long evening of work. Her hands were pressed flat against the cold stone palms, down fingers splayed, and she was not looking at the shattered wine jug beside her or at the spreading pool of dark red liquid that was already seeping into the cracks between the stones. She was looking at the woman standing over her. Kendra Ashford. Kendra was 23 years old, blonde, wearing a dress of white silk that probably cost more than everything Alara Blackwood owned combined. She was the younger sister of Theron Ashford, the Lycan King of the Northern Crown, and she carried that relationship like a crown of her own. Her face was beautiful in the way that comes from good bloodlines and never missing a meal. But there was something cold in the set of her mouth, something mean in the way her eyes tracked movement. "You clumsy little wretch," Kendra said. Her voice was not loud. She did not need volume. The hall had gone silent, watching. "Do you know what this dress cost?" Alara kept her eyes on the floor. She had learned over 4 years that looking up was often worse than staying down. Her voice, when it came, was quiet and carefully empty of anything that could be called defiance or pleading or any other emotion that might extend the moment. "I apologize, my lady. It was an accident." "An accident?" Kendra stepped closer. Wine had splashed across the hem of her white dress, a dark stain spreading like blood through snow. "You people are always having accidents, aren't you? Dropping things, breaking things, making messes that others have to clean up." Alara said nothing. The position of her hands on the stone was deliberate, calculated over years of similar moments. Palms flat, weight forward, eyes down. The geometry of minimal escalation. Kendra reached down and grabbed a fistful of Alara's dark hair, yanking her head back so their eyes met. Pain shot through Alara's scalp, sharp and immediate, but she did not cry out. Crying out made things worse. "Look at me when I'm speaking to you." Alara looked. Kendra's face was close now, close enough that Alara could smell the mead on her breath, the rosewater perfume that clung to her skin and hair. Close enough to see the particular kind of anger in Kendra's eyes. The kind that had nothing to do with wine on a dress and everything to do with the pleasure of having someone to hurt who could not hurt you back. I think, Kendra said slowly, her grip tightening in Alara's hair, you need to learn to be more careful. She released Alara's hair and stepped back. For half a second, Alara thought it was over. Then Kendra's hand moved to her belt and Alara saw the blade. It was not a large knife. Maybe 6 inches of silver the kind nobles carried for cutting meat at table and for other purposes when the opportunity arose. Silver was expensive, but Kendra could afford it. More than afford it. She could afford to waste it on gestures. The blade came down fast. Alara tried to pull back, but Kendra was faster. The silver edge caught her forearm just below the elbow, a single clean slash that opened the skin in a line 3 inches long and deep enough to matter. The pain was immediate and specific. Silver on werewolf skin did not just cut, it burned. The wound smoked a thin gray haze rising from torn flesh, and the smell of burning meat filled the air around them, acrid and unmistakable. Alara gasped. She could not help it. The sound escaped before she could lock it down, a sharp inhale through clenched teeth. Blood welled up dark and red, spilling over her arm and dripping onto the stone floor in thick drops that looked black in the torchlight. 400 people watched. No one moved. This was not unusual. This was not shocking. This was how things were done in Blackwood Keep when someone displeased someone of higher rank. Discipline, correction, the maintenance of order through the application of pain to those who could not refuse it. Alara's vision swam. The wound throbbed with each heartbeat, a white-hot pulse of agony that spread up her arm and into her shoulder. She swayed, trying to stay upright, trying to hold the position, because standing was better than falling, and falling would invite worse. She fell anyway. Her knees hit the stone first, then her hands, and then the world tilted, and she was on her side on the cold floor, blood pooling beneath her arm, the edges of her vision going gray and soft. The last thing she saw clearly was Kendra stepping back, wiping the blade on a cloth pulled from her sleeve, her face calm and satisfied. The last thing she heard was the murmur of 400 voices starting to resume their conversations, the feast continuing around her like water flowing past a stone. And then a different sound cut through the noise. Footsteps. Not the quick shuffle of a servant coming to drag her away. Not the measured tread of guards moving to restore order. These were different, heavier, slower, deliberate in a way that made people stop talking and turn to look. Alara's eyes were closed now, but she heard the footsteps approach, heard them stop beside her, felt the shift in the air as someone large knelt down on the stone floor next to where she lay bleeding. Then hands large and warm slid beneath her shoulders and knees, lifting her as though she weighed nothing at all. She opened her eyes. The face above her was scarred. A brutal line ran from the man's left temple down across his cheek to his jaw, the kind of scar that came from a blade or claws and had healed badly because it had been deep and whoever bore it had not rested long enough for proper healing. His hair was dark, almost black, worn longer than was common among pack leaders, and his eyes were gray, the color of winter storms over mountains. He was looking down at her, and in those gray eyes was something Alara had not seen directed at her in 4 years. Concern. "You're safe now," the man said. His voice was deep, quiet, meant only for her, even though 400 people were watching. "No one will touch you again." He stood holding her against his chest and turned to face the hall. Alara felt the shift in his body as he moved, felt the controlled strength in the arms that held her, felt the warmth of him through the thin fabric of her dress. She also felt something else, something she did not have words for yet, a pulling sensation in her chest like a hand reaching from inside her ribs towards something outside, toward him, as though recognizing something it had been looking for without knowing it was lost. The man carrying her looked across the hall to where Garrick Blackwood stood at the head table, frozen in mid-gesture. His cup of mead still raised his face, cycling through expressions too quickly to name. When the man spoke again, his voice carried. It filled the hall the way Garrick's had, but without effort, without performance. Just sound moving through space, impossible to ignore. "Who," the man said, "gave you permission to harm your daughter at a feast held under my roof?" The words landed in the silence like stones dropped into still water. Garrick's face went white, because everyone in the hall knew who was speaking. Everyone recognized the scar, the voice, the gray eyes that were already starting to shift toward a different color entirely. Theron Ashford, Lycan King of the Northern Crown. The man who ruled 7 packs and answered to no one. And he was holding Alara Blackwood in his arms, her blood soaking into his black leather coat, while he stared at her father and waited for an answer that everyone in the room knew Garrick could not give. The silence in the great hall stretched. Seconds became 10 seconds, became 20, and still no one spoke. 400 pack members stood, frozen in various states of interrupted celebration cups, halfway to mouths, conversations abandoned mid-sentence, every eye fixed on the tableau at the center of the room. Theron did not move. He stood holding Alara, his posture utterly still, utterly patient, with the particular quality of stillness that came from absolute certainty. He was not waiting for Garrick to decide how to respond. He was waiting for Garrick to understand that there was only one response possible, and that any delay in delivering it was simply Garrick making things worse for himself. Garrick understood. Alara could see it in the way her father's face shifted, the color returning in uneven patches, the throat working as he swallowed whatever first response had tried to surface. When he finally spoke, his voice was controlled, measured, the voice of a man performing deference he did not feel. "Your Majesty?" Garrick inclined his head, not quite a bow, but close enough to satisfy protocol. "I did not know you had arrived. Your messenger said you would not reach the keep until tomorrow." "We made good time," Theron said. His tone was flat, giving nothing. "You have not answered my question." Garrick's jaw tightened. Alara knew that particular tension in her father's face, had learned to read it the way prey animals learn to read the posture of predators. It meant he was angry and working very hard not to show it. "The girl is my daughter," Garrick said. "She was careless. Discipline is a father's right and responsibility." "Discipline." Theron repeated the word as though tasting it, testing its weight. His gray eyes moved from Garrick to Kendra, who had gone very still near the north wall, the silver blade no longer visible, but its presence implied in the guilty stiffness of her shoulders. "Is that what we're calling it?" He looked down at Alara. She was still conscious, though her vision kept trying to narrow and fade at the edges. The silver burn on her arm throbbed with each heartbeat, and she could feel wetness spreading where the blood soaked through her dress and into the fabric of Theron's coat. She thought distantly that she should apologize for that, for ruining his clothes, but the words would not come. "She's bleeding," Theron said, still quiet, still controlled. "She was cut with silver. That is not discipline. That is cruelty." Garrick's face darkened. "With respect, Your Majesty, you do not know the circumstances." "I know what I saw." Theron's voice dropped half an octave, and something in it made the torches along the wall gutter and flare as though a wind had passed through the hall. "I saw your daughter on her knees. I saw blood. I saw silver. And I saw 400 pack members watching it happen as though it were entertainment." He took a step forward. Just one, but it was enough to make Garrick take a step back, an involuntary retreat that he tried to disguise as a shift in weight. "If this is how you rule your pack," Theron said, "then we need to have a longer conversation. Later, for now I am taking her to be treated." He turned and walked toward the eastern exit, carrying Alara as though she were something precious and fragile, as though the blood soaking into his coat and the stares of 400 witnesses meant nothing at all compared to getting her somewhere safe. Alara's head rested against his chest. She could hear his heartbeat, steady and slow, the rhythm of someone completely in control of themselves. She could also hear something else, something underneath the heartbeat, a sound like distant thunder or the growl of something very large held carefully in check. His wolf. She was hearing his wolf, and it was angry. They passed through the arched doorway into the eastern corridor. The noise of the feast faded behind them, replaced by the echo of Theron's boots on stone and the hiss and pop of torches set at intervals along the walls. The corridor was narrow here, built for defense rather than comfort, and the shadows were thick between the pools of firelight. Alara tried to speak. "Your Majesty, I..." "Don't." The word was gentle but absolute. "Save your strength." "I can walk. You don't need to." "I know I don't need to." Theron's arms tightened fractionally around her, careful not to jar the injured arm. "I am choosing to." They climbed a spiral staircase, stone steps worn smooth in the centers from centuries of use. Alara counted them without meaning, to a habit, formed from long practice of counting things, because counting was a way to stay present, to stay conscious, to not drift away into the gray space that opened up when the pain got bad enough. 43 steps, then a landing, then a corridor wider than the one below, with doors of heavy oak banded in iron set at regular intervals. Theron moved past them without hesitation, navigating the keep as though he had been here many times before, which Alara supposed he had. The Northern Crown maintained alliances with all the major packs, and that meant visits, feasts, councils. She had seen him before she realized. Seen him moving through the halls of Blackwood Keep with his retinue, always distant, always surrounded by guards and advisors. Never close enough for her to see the scar on his face or the gray of his eyes, or the particular way he moved, which was like water over stone, finding the path of least resistance without appearing to look for it. He stopped at a door near the end of the corridor and pushed it open with his shoulder. Inside was a bedchamber larger than any room Alara had ever slept in, with a fireplace already lit, and a bed with 4 posts and a canopy of dark blue fabric. The bed was made, the first smoothed flat, waiting. Theron crossed the room and laid her down on it with a care that felt almost absurd given the circumstances. Alara sank into softness so complete it made her want to cry, though she had stopped crying years ago as a matter of policy. The furs were warm from the fire, and the pillows smelled like lavender and cedar, and the wound in her arm still burned like someone was holding a poker fresh from the coals against her skin. "Stay there," Theron said and left the room. Alara lay very still. She was not good at stillness when it was her choice, rather than a requirement, but she was hurt enough and disoriented enough that stillness seemed like the only reasonable option. She looked at the ceiling, which was timber beams and plaster, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. The Lycan King had carried her out of the Great Hall, in front of 400 people, in front of her father. He had challenged Garrick's authority, questioned his leadership, and then removed Alara from the situation as though he had every right to do so, which she supposed he did. Lycan Kings did not need permission. That was what made them kings. But it still did not make sense. She was nobody, the defective daughter of an increasingly desperate alpha. The girl who had stood in the sacred circle 4 years ago under the full moon, while 300 pack members waited for her to shift and who had given them nothing. The shame of the Blackwood line. Why would Theron Ashford care about her at all? The door opened. Theron returned, followed by a man Alara recognized as Aldrich Kane, the royal advisor. Aldrich was in his 40s, gray at the temples, with the kind of face that gave away nothing unless he wanted it to. He carried a leather satchel that clinked with the sound of glass on glass, and he moved with the efficient economy of someone who had done this many times before. Theron stopped at the bedside. "This will hurt," he said, looking down at Alara. "Silver burns need to be cleaned properly or they fester. I'm going to do it myself." To do it. Aldrich glanced at Theron, one eyebrow raised fractionally. "Your Majesty, I am perfectly capable." "I know you are." Theron held out his hand without looking away from Alara. "Give me the kit." Aldrich handed over the satchel without further argument. He had clearly learned when to push and when to concede, and this was a concession moment. Theron opened the satchel and began removing items. A clay jar of something that smelled sharp and medicinal. Strips of clean linen. A small bottle of clear liquid that was probably alcohol for sterilization, and a wicked-looking pair of forceps. He sat on the edge of the bed close enough that Alara could feel the heat of him through the furs. "I need to see the wound. May I move your arm?" The question surprised her. People did not ask permission to touch her. They simply touched, moved, positioned, used. The fact that he was asking, that he was waiting for her answer, made something in her chest tighten in a way that had nothing to do with pain. "Yes," she managed. Theron lifted her injured arm with a gentleness that seemed impossible for hands as large as his. The sleeve of her dress was soaked with blood and stuck to the wound. He produced a small knife from his belt and cut the fabric away rather than peeling it off, which would have torn the injury open further. The wound looked worse exposed, 3 inches long, deep enough that Alara could see the pale gleam of something beneath the blood that might have been tendon or bone. The edges were black with silver burn, and thin gray smoke still rose from the damaged tissue. Theron's jaw tightened. Just a fraction, just for a second, but Alara saw it. "This will hurt," he said again. "If you need to scream, scream. I would rather you scream than pass out from holding it in." He opened the clay jar. The smell intensified, sharp and green and bitter, like crushed herbs mixed with something astringent. He dipped 2 fingers into the jar and brought them out, coated in a thick paste the color of moss. When he touched the paste to her wound, Alara discovered that she had been wrong about the silver burn being the worst pain she had ever felt. This was worse. The paste did something to the silver residue in the wound, reacting with it, drawing it out. It felt like fire and ice at the same time, like her arm was being flayed from the inside, like every nerve ending was screaming at once. She tried to hold still. She tried to breathe through it. She lasted maybe 5 seconds before the sound came out of her throat, unbidden, a sharp, high note of pure agony that she cut off as soon as she recognized it was happening. "Don't stop," Theron said. His voice was very close now, very calm. "Let it out. No one here will punish you for feeling pain." So she did. She let the scream come ragged and raw, and it helped somehow, giving the pain somewhere to go, instead of bottling it up inside where it had nowhere to expand except into her bones. Theron worked quickly, spreading the paste across the entire wound, wiping away the black residue as it surfaced, cleaning the torn flesh until it ran red with normal blood instead of the dark, smoking mess it had been. When he finished, he wrapped her arm in clean linen, binding it tight, but not too tight, the kind of bandaging that came from experience. Done, he said, setting her arm back down on the furs with the same gentleness he had used to lift it. The worst is over. Alara was shaking. She could not stop. Her whole body trembled with aftershock, and her breathing came too fast, shallow gasps, that she could not seem to slow down. Theron reached out slowly, giving her time to see the movement, and placed his hand on her shoulder. Just rested it there, warm and solid, the weight of it grounding. Breathe with me, he said. In through your nose. Count to 4. She tried. She pulled air and counted in her head. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 4 counts. Mit, she held. Out through your mouth, 4 counts. She exhaled. They did this together, breath matching breath, until her shaking eased and her heart stopped trying to hammer its way out of her chest. When she could speak again, the first thing she said was, I am sorry I bled on your coat. Theron stared at her for a long moment. Then something that might have been amusement or sadness or some combination of both flickered across his face. That, he said quietly, is the least important thing that has happened tonight. He stood addressing Aldrich, who had been waiting near the door with the patient stillness of someone accustomed to giving his king space. I want to know everything about her. Family history, medical records if they exist. Why she has not shifted, all of it. Of course, Your Majesty. Aldrich's eyes moved to Alara, assessing. Should I summon the healer Eleanor to examine? No. Theron cut him off. Not yet. First I need to understand what I am looking at. He moved toward the door, then stopped and turned back to Alara. Sleep if you can. You are safe here. I will make sure of it. And then he was gone, Aldrich following the door, closing behind them with a soft click of the latch. Alara lay in the vast bed in the warm room, with the fire crackling and her bandaged arm throbbing and her mind refusing to settle into anything like coherent thought. She tried to understand what had happened. She tried to make it fit into the architecture of how the world worked, the rules she had learned over 4 years of learning them the hard way. But it would not fit, because in the world she knew people like Theron Ashford did not carry people like her out of great halls. They did not bandage wounds with their own hands. They did not ask permission to touch. They did not promise safety as though it were a thing they could deliver and intended to. And yet he had done all of those things. She closed her eyes and tried to sleep, though she knew sleep would not come easily. It never did. But the bed was soft and the room was warm, and for the first time in 4 years, she was not in the basement room with its stone floor and thin blanket and the sound of dripping water in the dark. So she lay there and waited for morning and tried not to think too hard about the way Theron's hand had felt on her shoulder, or the steadiness of his voice when he told her to breathe, or the particular shade of gray his eyes had been before he left the room. Tried and failed completely. Because even through the pain and the confusion and the exhaustion, even through all of that, there was something else. Something in her chest, deep behind her ribs, where her wolf had been silent and still for 4 years, pressed down and smothered and taught not to move. It was moving now, just barely, just enough to notice. A pushing sensation like a hand reaching from inside towards something outside, towards somewhere down the corridor where the Lichen King had gone, reaching toward him. And Alara, who had spent 4 years not allowing herself to hope for anything, felt the first dangerous stirring of hope anyway. Alara woke to unfamiliar softness and the smell of wood smoke. For the first 3 seconds, she did not remember where she was. Her body knew only that the surface beneath her was not the thin straw mattress in the basement room, that the air was warm instead of damp and cold, that light was filtering through her closed eyelids in a way that suggested actual windows rather than the narrow ventilation slits she had grown accustomed to. Then memory returned in a rush. The feast, the shattered wine jug, Kendra's blade, the silver burn. And Theron Ashford carrying her through the quarters of Blackwood Keep as though she were something worth saving. Her eyes opened. The bedchamber looked different in daylight. Larger somehow. The stone walls were hung with tapestries depicting hunting scenes and forest landscapes, and the morning sun came through a narrow window to her left, throwing a rectangle of golden light across the floor. The fire had burned down to embers in the hearth, but the room still held its warmth. Her arm throbbed. Not the searing agony of last night, but a deep, persistent ache that radiated from the wound site up to her shoulder and down to her fingertips. She lifted it carefully, examining the bandaging. Clean white linen wrapped with the kind of precision that suggested experience. No blood had seeped through during the night. She sat up slowly, testing the limits of her pain. Her head swam briefly, then settled. She was wearing the same gray dress from last night now, stiff with dried blood down the right sleeve and across the bodice where she had bled against Theron's chest. The fabric was ruined, not that it had been worth much to begin with. The door opened without warning. Alara flinched, a reflexive full-body tension that she could not suppress fast enough to hide. But it was not her father at the threshold. It was a woman she did not recognize, perhaps 30 years old, with brown hair, braided in a crown around her head, and wearing the practical wool dress of household staff. She carried a tray that steamed with the smell of porridge and honey. "Good morning," the woman said. Her voice was brisk, but not unkind. "I am Meredith. His Majesty asked me to bring you breakfast and help you clean up. How is your arm?" Alara's mouth was dry. She swallowed, trying to find her voice. "It hurts. But it is better than last night. Silver burns always hurt worse the first day." Meredith set the tray on a small table near the bed and began unpacking its contents with efficient movements. A bowl of porridge, a cup of what smelled like herbal tea, a piece of bread with butter already spread thick. "The pasty he used will draw out the poison, but you will be sore for a few days yet. Can you eat?" "I think so." "Then eat. You will heal faster with food in you." It was not a suggestion. Meredith placed the bowl in Alara's hands and stood watching with the expectant patience of someone who intended to make sure the task was completed. Alara ate, spooning the porridge into her mouth mechanically at first, then with increasing hunger as her body remembered that it had not eaten since midday yesterday. The porridge was thick and sweet, flavored with honey and cinnamon, better than anything she had tasted in months. When the bowl was empty, Meredith took it and replaced it with a cup of tea. "Drink. It will help with the pain." Alara drank. The tea was bitter beneath the honey, some kind of willow bark preparation, probably the standard treatment for pain and fever. It burned going down but settled warm in her stomach. "Now," Meredith said, "we need to get you out of that dress and into something clean. His Majesty wants to see you this morning, and you cannot go to him covered in blood." The thought of seeing Theron again made something in Alara's chest tighten. She was not sure if it was anxiety or anticipation or some mixture of both that had no clean name. "I do not have another dress." "I brought one." Meredith gestured to a bundle of dark blue fabric draped over a chair near the window. "It will be a bit long on you, but it is clean and whole, which is more than can be said for what you are wearing now." She helped Alara, stand steadying her when she swayed, and worked the ruined gray dress over her head with careful attention to the bandaged arm. Alara stood in her shift, shivering despite the warm room, while Meredith examined the bandaging. "He did good work," Meredith said, more to herself than to Alara. "Better than some trained healers I have seen. The binding is clean and the paste application was thorough." She looked up, meeting Alara's eyes. "You are lucky he found you when he did. Silver wounds left untreated can turn septic in hours." "I know," Alara said quietly. She had seen it happen once to a kitchen boy who had stolen a silver spoon and cut himself trying to hide it. He had died 3 days later, fever-mad and delirious, the wound on his hand swollen and black. Meredith helped her into the new dress. It was simple wool, well made, dyed a deep blue that reminded Alara of twilight. The fabric was soft against her skin, and it fit reasonably well through the shoulders and bodice, though it did drag a bit at the hem. Meredith produced a leather belt and cinched it at Alara's waist, then stepped back to assess. "You will do," she said. "His Majesty is waiting in the council chamber. I will take you there." They left the bedchamber and walked through corridors Alara had never seen before. This was the guest wing, she realized, the section of Blackwood Keep reserved for visiting nobility and maintained at a standard far above the servants' quarters. The floors here were polished stone rather than rough-hewn rock, and the walls were plastered and painted instead of bare. Tapestries hung at intervals, and actual glass filled the window frames instead of oiled parchment. They descended a staircase and crossed through a covered walkway that connected the guest wing to the main keep. Guards stood at the entrance wearing the gray and silver of Blackwood colors, but they stepped aside without question when they saw Meredith, clearly recognizing her as someone with authority to move freely. The council chamber was on the second floor of the main keep, a rectangular room with a long table of dark oak and chairs arranged around it. Maps covered the walls showing the territories of the 7 packs and the wilderness beyond. A fire burned in the hearth despite the morning warmth, and 3 people stood near it in conversation. Theron Ashford, Aldrich Kane, and a third man Alara did not know, younger than Aldrich, but older than Theron, wearing the practical leathers of someone who spent more time on horseback than in halls. They all turned when she entered. Theron's eyes found hers immediately, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite a smile, but a softening, the relaxation of the controlled neutrality he wore like armor. He crossed the room toward her in 3 long strides. "How is your arm?" he asked, his voice pitched low enough that it did not carry to the others. "Healing," Alara said. Meredith says the bandaging was well done. Good. He gestured toward the table. Sit. We need to talk. It was not a request, but it was not quite a command either. Something in between. Alara moved to the nearest chair and sat hyper-aware of the way the three men arranged themselves around the table. Theron took the seat directly across from her. Aldrich sat to his right. The third man remained standing near the fire, watching with the quiet attention of someone whose job was to observe and remember. Alara Blackwood, Theron said, folding his hands on the table in front of him. I need you to answer some questions for me. They may be difficult. They may touch on things you would rather not discuss. But I need honest answers, and I need them now. Do you understand? Alara nodded. Her throat was tight, but she forced words through it anyway. Yes, Your Majesty. How long have you been taking the tonic? The question landed like a stone. For a moment, Alara could not process it, could not understand how he knew about the tonic at all, much less why he was asking about it now. I do not, she started, then stopped. Lying to a Lichen King seemed like a catastrophically bad idea. 4 years, since I was 16. Every day, every morning, my father gives it to me with breakfast. He says it supports the blood when there is no working wolf. Something moved behind Theron's eyes, something dark and cold and tightly controlled. Describe it. Color, taste, consistency. Dark brown, almost black, thick like honey but thinner. It tastes like metal and dirt. Aldrich made a small sound, quickly suppressed. Theron's jaw tightened fractionally. He reached into the leather satchel at his feet and produced a small glass vial filled with liquid that matched exactly the description Alara had just given. Like this, he asked, setting it on the table between them. Alara stared at the vial. Yes, exactly like that. Where did you get it? From your father's private stores. Aldrich searched his chambers last night while you slept. Theron leaned forward, his gray eyes holding hers with an intensity that made it impossible to look away. Alara, that is not medicine. That is poison. The words made no sense. She heard them, understood the individual components, but could not fit them together into a coherent meaning. No, my father would not. Your father has been dosing you with organic silver suspension for 4 years. Theron's voice was very calm, very controlled, the kind of calm that came from working very hard not to be something else. It is a compound designed to suppress wolf manifestation. It interrupts the connection between human consciousness and wolf instinct. In high enough doses administered consistently over time, it prevents shifting entirely. The room tilted. Alara gripped the edge of the table, needing something solid to hold on to, while her understanding of the world rearranged itself. That is illegal. Yes, under the Northern Accord, unauthorized silver dosing of a pack member is classified as willful harm and carries severe penalties. But he said, her voice cracked, she swallowed and tried again. He said I was defective, that I could not shift because something was wrong with me, that the tonic would help. There is nothing wrong with you, Theron said. Each word was deliberate, weighted, absolute. Your wolf is alive. I can sense her. She is being held down by the silver in your blood, but she is there, strong, aware, reaching. Alara's hand moved unconsciously to her chest, to the place where she had felt that strange pushing sensation last night, that sense of something inside her straining towards something outside. You can sense her. Yes, clearly. He paused. Can you? She thought about it. Thought about the moments over the past 4 years when she had felt things she could not explain. The times she had known her father was approaching before she heard his footsteps. The times she had smelled silver in her food before she tasted it and had eaten less, though she could never have said why. The times she had felt safer in the forest than in the keep, as though something in her recognized the wilderness as home in a way the stone walls never had. Sometimes, she said slowly, I thought I was imagining it. You were not imagining it. Your wolf has been trying to reach you through the suppression. The fact that you could feel anything at all through 4 years of continuous silver dosing speaks to how strong she is. Aldrich cleared his throat gently. Your Majesty, perhaps we should explain the broader context. Theron nodded without taking his eyes off Alara. 3 years ago, I received a prophecy from a woman named Morgana. She is a seer from the eastern reaches, one of the few whose visions have been consistently verified. She came to my court uninvited and told me that my mate would be a woman who carried silver in her blood that was not her own, that she would be hidden in a father's house, that she would be in pain she no longer recognized as pain because it had become her normal. He reached across the table, slowly, giving her time to see the movement to pull back if she wanted to. When she did not, he placed his hand palm up on the wood between them, an offering. I have spent 3 years searching, he said. I have investigated 47 cases of suspected silver abuse across the territories. I have interviewed 83 females who might have fit the prophecy parameters. None of them were right. He paused. Until last night. Alara stared at his hand, large scarred across the knuckles, the nails cut short and blunt. A hand that had held weapons and killed with them, and also bandaged her wound with a gentleness that still made no sense to her. I do not understand, she whispered. When I carried you out of the great hall, it caught your scent clearly for the first time. Jasmine and cold mountain rain, like the smell after the first snow melts. His voice dropped lower. I have been coming to Blackwood Keep for 2 years, and I have scented you before. Faint traces in corridors, lingering in rooms you had passed through, but I could never find the source. You were always hidden, always kept away from gatherings where I might see you clearly. My father does not let me attend feasts, Alara said, or councils, or any gathering where visiting nobility might be present. He says I am an embarrassment. He says that because he knows what you are. Theron's hand remained on the table between them, still waiting. Your wolf is not weak, Alara. She is suppressed. There is a difference, and I believe, he stopped choosing his words carefully. I believe that if the silver leaves your system, if you are given time to heal and learn to listen to her, you will shift, and when you do, you will be formidable. The pushing in her case was stronger now, insistent, like something trapped behind a door hearing a voice on the other side and trying desperately to reach it. Alara placed her hand in Theron's. The moment their skin touched, electricity arced between them. Not metaphorical, actual sensation, a jolt that ran from her palm up her arm and into her chest where it met that pushing presence and amplified it, strengthened it, until for the first time in 4 years, Alara felt her wolf not as a distant pressure or a half-imagined sensation, but as a living presence, aware and desperate and howling silent inside her. She gasped. Her hand tightened on Theron's, involuntarily gripping hard enough that it probably hurt, though he did not pull away. She knows me, Theron said quietly. Your wolf recognizes what I am to you. That is not something that can be faked or forced. That is biology, instinct, the mate bond forming. I thought those were stories, Alara managed, children's tales to explain arranged marriages. They are real, rare but real, and when they happen, they are undeniable. He turned her hand over, gently examining her palm, the thin fingers, the calluses from years of work. You are my mate, Alara Blackwood. The prophecy was about you. I came to this feast specifically hoping to find you, though I did not know it would happen the way it did. My father, Alara's voice broke on the word, he did this to me, deliberately, for 4 years. Yes. Why? Aldrich spoke for the first time since the conversation began. Control. A daughter who shifts is a daughter with power. Power in a wolf pack is not abstract. It is physical, political, reproductive. A strong she-wolf from an established alpha bloodline can negotiate her own alliances. She can attract mates of high rank. She can challenge for leadership if she chooses. He paused, letting the implications settle. A daughter declared defective and kept dependent can be used for labor, blamed for failures, and controlled without recourse. And if that daughter also happens to be keeping a father's secret, Aldrich gestured to the vial of silver compound, then she becomes leverage, insurance against exposure. What secret? Alara asked. Theron and Aldrich exchanged a glance. Some silent communication passed between them, and Theron nodded fractionally. Aldrich produced a rolled parchment from his own satchel and spread it on the table. It was covered in dense text and signatures sealed with red wax that bore an unfamiliar sigil. This is a blood pact between your father and a man named Valerius Thorn. Do you know that name? Alara shook her head. He runs a rogue enforcer company out of the eastern borderlands. Mercenaries for hire. Your father borrowed $2.3 million in gold from Thorn 3 years ago to cover debts from failed harvests and war reparations. The number was so large, Alara could not conceptualize it. That much. The loan came with specific terms, structured repayment over 7 years with pack resources as collateral. But there is a secondary clause. Aldrich pointed to a section of text near the bottom of the parchment. If your father defaults, or if the arrangement is exposed to Crown authority, Thorn's company gains legal right to mark every member of Blackwood Pack for enforcement action. All 400 wolves become targets. Alara felt cold. He used the entire pack as guarantee. Yes, and he has been using you to ensure no one discovers it. Theron's voice was hard now, the controlled calm fraying at the edges. A defective daughter kept in the basement given just enough autonomy to serve at feasts, but never enough to speak with visitors privately, never enough to tell anyone what was being done to her. If you had shifted 4 years ago, you might have questioned the tonic. You might have refused it. You might have found allies who would have investigated on your behalf. But he made sure you never had the strength or status to do any of those things. The pieces assembled themselves in Alara's mind with horrible clarity. Every punishment for minor infractions, every time she had been locked in the basement for days at a time, every public humiliation designed to reinforce that she was worthless, defective, not worth listening to or believing. It had all been deliberate, calculated, a system built to keep her powerless and silent. "He is my father," she said, not because she disbelieved what Theron and Aldrich were telling her. She believed it completely. But because some part of her needed to say it aloud to hear how it sounded, to test whether the word father still meant anything, when applied to a man who had poisoned his own child for years to protect his political position. It did not. The word felt hollow, empty, a title attached to nothing. Theron's hand tightened on hers. "I know, and I am sorry. You deserve better than this. You deserve to be protected and valued and given every opportunity to become who you were meant to be. Instead, you were used. That is not your fault. It is his." Alara looked down at their joined hands, hers small and scarred, his large and steady. The connection between them was still there, that electric sense of recognition, and underneath it, the constant pushing of her wolf reaching toward his, trying to close a distance, that the silver in her blood would not let her cross completely. "What happens now?" she asked. Now Theron said, "We stop it, all of it. The poisoning ends immediately. You stay here under my protection while the silver clears your system. Aldrich will document everything for formal tribunal, and your father will answer for what he has done. He will deny it. He will say I am lying, that I am mentally unstable from the failure to shift. He can say whatever he wants. The evidence does not require your testimony, though I hope you will give it anyway. We have the vial of compound from his stores. We will test your blood and prove the silver is present. We have the blood pack showing motive, and we have 47 precedent cases from other packs where similar patterns emerged. Garrick is not the first alpha to do this to a daughter, but I intend to make him one of the last." The third man, who had been silent near the fire throughout the entire conversation, finally spoke. His voice was rough like gravel grinding. "Your Majesty, Blackwood has 30 loyal guards and significant support among the older pack families. If you move against him directly, you risk civil conflict within the pack." "Then we do not move against him directly, Corvin." Theron released Alara's hand slowly, though the loss of contact felt like something physical being pulled away. "We build the case properly. Public tribunal. Full council witness. No room for doubt or political maneuvering. When we take him down, it will be permanent and legal and beyond any challenge." He stood, and the other two men rose with him automatically. "Alara, you will stay in the guest wing. Meredith will attend you. If you need anything, tell her, and she will bring it. Do not leave this section of the keep without escort. Your father will try to reach you, and I do not want you anywhere he can find you alone." "Will he hurt me?" The question came out smaller than she intended. "He will try to intimidate you into silence. Whether that involves physical harm depends on how desperate he becomes when he realizes what we know." Theron moved around the table toward her, and when he stopped, he was close enough that she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. "I will not let him touch you again. You have my word on that. The word of a Lycan king." Alara had been given many promises over the course of her life. Most of them had been broken, some within hours, some within days. But something in the way Theron said it, in the absolute certainty of his voice and the gray steadiness of his eyes, made her believe him. "Thank you," she said. He smiled then, small, brief, but genuine. "You do not need to thank me for doing what should have been done 4 years ago, but you are welcome regardless." He left Aldrich and Corvin following their footsteps, fading down the corridor outside. Alara sat alone at the long table in the council chamber, staring at the vial of silver compound that Theron had left behind. 4 years. 4 years of drinking poison every morning, believing it was medicine. 4 years of thinking she was broken when she had been deliberately broken by someone who was supposed to protect her. The rage came sudden and absolute, a white-hot surge that filled her chest and made her hands shake. She wanted to scream. She wanted to throw the vial against the wall and watch it shatter. She wanted to find her father and demand answers, demand apologies, demand something that could make this make sense. But underneath the rage, quieter but no less powerful, was something else. Hope. because Theron had said her wolf was alive. He had said she could shift. He had said she was his mate, chosen by prophecy and biology and something deeper than either of those things. And for the first time in 4 years, Elara let herself believe that maybe possibly she could be something other than what her father had made her. She pressed her hand to her chest, feeling for that presence inside her, that pushing sensation that was stronger now than it had ever been. Her wolf was there, waiting, ready, and the silver that had held her down for 4 years was beginning finally to lose its grip. The guest wing fell into a rhythm over the next 3 days. Meredith arrived each morning with breakfast and fresh bandages, changed Alara's dressing with efficient gentleness, and departed with instructions to rest and heal. The wound on her arm was closing, the angry black edges of silver burn fading to pink and then to pale scar tissue that would probably never disappear completely, but would at least stop hurting eventually. Alara did not rest. She could not. 4 years of constant work had built patterns into her body that did not dissolve simply because she was now in a comfortable room with no tasks assigned. She woke at dawn regardless of when she had fallen asleep. She made the bed with hospital corners, even though Meredith would have done it. She paced the length of the chamber, counting steps, counting breaths, counting anything she could count, because counting was what you did when your mind was too loud and you needed something external to focus on. On the second day, Meredith brought books, a stack of them, leather-bound and heavy, carried in a canvas bag that she set on the small writing desk near the window. His Majesty thought you might want something to occupy your time, Meredith said, unpacking them one by one. These are from the Keep's library, histories mostly, some herbology, a treatise on pack law from the Second Council. Alara touched the spine of the topmost volume. The leather was smooth and cool under her fingers, and the title was stamped in gold leaf, The Formation of the Northern Accord. I do not read very well, she admitted. I was taught letters, but not much beyond that. Then you will learn. Meredith's tone suggested this was not optional. Reading is a skill like any other. It improves with practice. She left before Alara could argue. Alara opened the first book. The text was dense and formal, written in the elaborate legal language of council documents, and it took her nearly an hour to parse the first page. But she kept going, sounding out unfamiliar words, rereading sentences until their meaning became clear, and slowly, gradually, the history began to unfold. The Northern Accord had been established 147 years ago, in the aftermath of the Blood Moon Wars, when the 7 major packs had finally exhausted themselves, fighting over territory and resources, and had agreed to a framework of shared governance. The Accord established pack boundaries, trade routes, marriage rights, and legal codes that applied across all territories. It also established prohibitions. Alara found the relevant section on the afternoon of the second day buried in the middle of a chapter on pack member welfare. The language was clear and absolute. No Alpha, Beta, or pack authority shall administer silver compounds to pack members without informed consent and documented medical necessity. Silver suppression of wolf manifestation is prohibited under all circumstances and shall be prosecuted as willful harm, carrying penalties of rank removal, territorial exile, or death as determined by tribunal. She read it 3 times, committing the words to memory. This was the law Theron had referenced, the law her father had been violating for 4 years, the law that, if enforced, would destroy everything Garrick Blackwood had built. On the 3rd day, Aldrich came to visit. He arrived mid-morning carrying a different kind of bag from the one Meredith used, this one made of stiff leather with metal clasps. He set it on the table and opened it without preamble, removing a series of glass vials, a silver needle, and several sheets of parchment covered in dense handwriting. I need to test your blood, he said, to document the silver content for tribunal evidence. It will hurt, but less than the wound on your arm. May I proceed? Alara extended her uninjured arm without hesitation. Yes. Aldrich worked with the same efficient precision Meredith showed in her tasks. He tied a leather cord around Alara's upper arm to make the veins visible, sterilized the needle in a small alcohol flame, and pierced the inside of her elbow with a quick, clean motion. Blood welled up dark and red, and he collected it in 3 separate vials, labeling each with careful script. When he finished, he pressed a clean cloth to the puncture and had her hold it there while he packed away his instruments. The silver content in your blood is 0.29 parts per million, he said, consulting his notes. That is down from 0.5 when we first tested 3 days ago. The decline is steady and predictable, which suggests your body is processing the compound out of your system now that you are no longer receiving daily doses. How long until it is gone completely? Alara asked. 4 to 6 weeks for your blood. Longer for your bone marrow and connective tissue. Silver accumulates in those areas and releases slowly. He looked up from his notes, meeting her eyes. But you should start feeling differences sooner than that. Your wolf will become more present as the suppression lifts. You may experience sensations you are not accustomed to. Heightened smell, better night vision, emotional intensity. What kind of emotional intensity? The kind that comes from having your instincts return after 4 years of chemical suppression. Your wolf has opinions, strong ones, about safety, territory, hierarchy, bonding. She has been trying to communicate those opinions through layers of silver that made it nearly impossible. As those layers thin, she will be louder, more insistent. Alara thought about the pushing sensation in her chest, the way it had grown stronger since that moment in the council chamber when Theron had held her hand. I feel her more when he is near, the Lycan King. That is the mate bond. Aldrich's expression softened fractionally. Your wolf recognizes him. She wants to be close to him. That wanting will intensify as the silver clears. Is it dangerous? Dangerous how? Will it make me lose control? Will I do things I do not mean to do? Aldrich considered this for a long moment. The bond amplifies instinct but doesn't control you. You remain capable of choice. If you choose to resist the bond, you can. It will be uncomfortable, but it is possible. He began packing his bag, returning the vials of blood to padded compartments. His Majesty wants to see you this evening. He has been giving you space to adjust, but there are things you need to discuss before the tribunal. I will send Meredith at sunset to escort you. He left and Alara returned to her books. She tried to focus on the text in front of her, a chapter about territorial dispute resolution, but her mind kept circling back to what Aldrich had said. The mate bond does not override your will. The reassurance should have been comforting, but instead it made her aware of how much of her will had been overridden for so long by other means. Silver, fear, the systematic destruction of her ability to advocate for herself. If she chose to resist the bond with Theron, she could. But did she want to? The question was too large to hold comfortably, so she set it aside and returned to reading. Sunset came in shades of orange and purple across the mountains, visible through the narrow window of Alara's chamber. Meredith arrived as promised, carrying a dress of deep green wool finer than anything Alara had worn before. For tonight, Meredith said, laying it across the bed, His Majesty is hosting a private dinner. Just you, him, and Aldrich. Nothing formal, but he prefers his guests to be comfortable. Alara changed with Meredith's help, though she was perfectly capable of dressing herself. The green dress fit better than the blue one had tailored to someone of approximately her size, and the color made her dark hair and gray eyes stand out in a way that felt almost deliberate. They walked through corridors that were growing familiar now, down the main staircase, across the covered walkway, into the eastern wing where guest chambers gave way to private rooms reserved for the Lycan King's personal use. Meredith stopped at a door of dark wood banded with iron and knocked twice. A voice from inside called permission to enter, and Meredith opened the door but did not follow Alara through. The room beyond was smaller than Alara expected. Not a great hall or formal dining chamber, but something more intimate. A round table set for three with simple wooden chairs and no elaborate decoration. A fire burned in the hearth, and two narrow windows showed the last light of sunset fading behind the mountains. Theron stood near the fire, dressed in black as he had been the night of the feast, though without the formal coat. Just a shirt and trousers and boots, his hair slightly damp as though he had recently washed. He turned when she entered, and something in his expression eased when he saw her. Alara, thank you for coming. You are the Lycan King, she said. When you summon someone, they come. I did not summon, I invited. There is a difference. He gestured to the table. Sit, please. Aldrich will join us shortly, but I wanted a moment to speak with you first. Alara sat in the chair he indicated. The cushion was soft and the table was already set with bread, cheese, cold meat, and a pitcher of what smelled like spiced cider. Theron took the chair across from her, not at the head, but at the side close enough that she could see the details of his face in the firelight. The scar that ran from temple to jaw. The gray of his eyes lighter than hers, almost silver in certain angles. The way his hands rested on the table, relaxed but ready, as though some part of him was always prepared for violence, even in moments of peace. How is your arm? He asked. And healing, Aldrich says the silver in my blood is decreasing. Good. That is good. He poured cider into 2 cups and pushed one toward her. I want to explain what will happen over the next few days. You deserve to know what you are walking into. Alara wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for something to hold. The tribunal. Yes, we will convene it publicly with representatives from all 7 packs present as witnesses. Aldrich will present evidence of the silver poisoning, the blood pact with the Valerius thorn, and the systematic abuse you endured. You will be asked to testify if you are willing, but it is not required. The physical evidence is sufficient for conviction. My father will deny everything. He will. We are prepared for that. Theron leaned forward slightly. Elara, I need you to understand something. This tribunal will be brutal. Not for you necessarily, though. It will not be easy to hear your life discussed in clinical detail by strangers. But for your father, it will be devastating. His rank will be stripped. He will be exiled, at minimum possibly executed, depending on how the council votes. The Blackwood Pack will be reorganized under new leadership. Everything he has built will be dismantled. He paused, letting the weight of that settle. If any part of you wants to protect him, despite what he did, if any part of you feels loyalty or obligation, or even just pity, now is the time to say so. I will not force you to participate in his destruction if it conflicts with what you need emotionally. But I also will not stop the tribunal from proceeding. Too much is at stake, and too many other daughters and other packs need to see that this behavior carries consequences. Elara stared into her cup. The cider was dark and fragrant, steam rising in delicate spirals. She thought about her father, about the times before the poisoning started when she was young enough to believe that fathers were protectors and providers and sources of safety. About the way he had looked at her on her 16th birthday standing in the sacred circle under the full moon waiting for a shift that never came. The disappointment in his face. The calculation. She thought about 4 years of drinking poison every morning believing it was medicine. She thought about silver burns and whip scars and 72 hours locked in a basement room with no food and no light. I do not want to protect him, she said. The words came out steady and clear. I want him to answer for what he did. I want everyone to know. I want other daughters to see that they do not have to endure this. If my testimony helps with that, I will give it. Theron's eyes held hers across the table. It will not be easy. Nothing in my life has been easy. I am accustomed to it. That, Theron said quietly, is not something you should have to be accustomed to. But I admire your strength, regardless. The door opened and Aldrich entered carrying a leather folder stuffed with parchment. He nodded to both of them and took the third chair, settling the folder on the table in front of him. Apologies for the delay. I was confirming attendance from the Council of Seven. All packs have agreed to send representatives. We will have full witness coverage. Good. Theron poured a third cup of cider and slid it toward Aldrich. Walk us through the order of proceedings. Aldrich opened his folder and extracted a sheet covered in neat handwriting. Opening statement from you as convening authority. Then presentation of evidence in 3 parts. Physical evidence of poisoning, financial documentation of the blood pact, and testimony regarding systematic abuse. I will handle the first 2 sections. Eleanor has agreed to provide medical testimony about silver compound effects, and if Elara is willing, her testimony will close the evidence presentation. He looked at her. You would be asked to describe the tonic administration, the physical abuse, and the conditions of your confinement. Defense will have opportunity to question you, though. Any harassment will be shut down immediately by tribunal rules. Do you understand what that means? I understand, Elara said. Then after evidence presentation, your father will be given opportunity to respond. After that, the council votes on guilt and sentencing. The process should take 4 to 6 hours depending on deliberation time. 6 hours of having her life examined and dissected in front of strangers. 6 hours of hearing the details of her suffering presented as legal evidence. 6 hours of watching her father try to justify the unjustifiable. When, Elara asked, 2 days from now. That gives us time to finalize documentation and allows all council representatives to arrive. Aldrich closed his folder. I know this is a great deal to process. If you have questions, ask them now. Elara had dozens of questions, hundreds. But the one that pushed to the front was, what happens to me if my father is exiled and the pack is reorganized? Where do I go? Silence fell across the table. Theron and Aldrich exchanged a glance and something unspoken passed between them. You stay with me, Theron said, here or at the Northern Crown's primary keep depending on where I am needed. You are my mate. That makes you part of the Northern Crown's household, regardless of what happens to Blackwood Pack. But I have not shifted. I do not have a working wolf yet. How can I be anyone's mate if... Your wolf is working. Theron's voice was firm. She is suppressed, but she is there and she is strong. I feel her every time I am near you. She knows me. She reaches for me. That is all the proof I need that the bond is real. He stood and moved around the table, stopping beside her chair. Slowly giving her time to refuse, he extended his hand palm up in the same offering he had made in the council chamber days ago. May I? Elara placed her hand in his. The electric jolt was immediate and stronger than before. It surged up her arm and into her chest where her wolf lived, and this time the response was unmistakable. Her wolf pushed hard against the silver-thin barrier between them, reaching toward Theron's presence with a desperation that made Alara gasp. "She is stronger," Theron said. His voice had gone rough, dual-toned, as though his own wolf was rising in response. "The silver is lifting. She is waking." He knelt beside her chair so their eyes were level. "Can you feel her?" "Yes," Alara whispered. "She wants to be closer to you. She is trying to—" She did not have words for what her wolf was trying to do. Break free. Emerge. Close the distance. All of those and none of them exactly. "Let her," Theron said. "Do not fight her. Just listen. Feel what she is telling you." Alara closed her eyes and turned her attention inward to that presence in her chest that had been silent for so long and was now anything but. Her wolf was there, enormous and silver bright and furious with 4 years of pent-up longing. She pushed and pushed against the barrier, not trying to shift. Yet the silver was still too strong for that, but trying to make herself known, trying to communicate. And what she was communicating was simple and absolute. Mate. Mine. Ours. Safe. Alara opened her eyes. Theron was still kneeling beside her, his hand warm around hers, his gray eyes watching her with an intensity that should have been frightening, but was not. "She says you are hers," Alara said. "I am. No hesitation, no doubt. And you are mine, not as possession, but as belonging, the way a river belongs to its valley, the way a wolf belongs to its pack. Necessary and chosen and right." He stood, releasing her hand slowly, and returned to his chair. The loss of contact felt like something physical being pulled away, but the awareness of her wolf remained louder and more present than it had been since she was 15 years old and still whole. They ate dinner after that conversation, shifting to safer topics. Aldrich told stories about tribunal proceedings from other packs, some of them darkly funny, others simply dark. Theron described the Northern Crown's primary keep built into a mountainside with views of 3 valleys and a sacred grove older than the written records. Alara listened more than she spoke, absorbing details, filing them away. When the meal ended and Meredith came to escort her back to the guest wing, Theron walked her to the door. "Sleep if you can," he said. "The next few days will be difficult. You will need your strength." "I will try." He reached out slowly again, always slowly with her, and brushed a strand of dark hair behind her ear. The gesture was gentle and utterly devastating because no one had touched her with gentleness in 4 years, and her body did not know what to do with it except want more. "That is not a small thing. Remember that when the tribunal gets hard." Alara nodded, not trusting her voice. She walked back to her chamber with Meredith changed into a nightgown and lay in the soft bed staring at the ceiling while the fire burned down to embers. Her wolf was awake. The tribunal was in 2 days. And somewhere in this keep, her father was planning his defense, probably already crafting the narrative that would paint her as unstable, manipulative, a liar seeking attention and revenge. It would not work. The evidence was too strong. But he would try anyway because that was what he did. He twisted reality until it fit the shape he needed, and he had been doing it successfully for years. But not anymore. Alara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling for her wolf, feeling for that bright silver presence that Theron had helped her recognize. 2 more days, she thought. Then everyone will know. Her wolf responded with a surge of fierce agreement, and for the first time in 4 years, Alara fell asleep feeling something other than afraid. She felt ready. The morning of the tribunal arrived with clear skies and bitter cold. Alara woke to frost patterns on the window glass and the smell of wood smoke from fires being stoked throughout the keep. Meredith came earlier than usual, carrying not just breakfast, but a bath, the copper tub dragged in by 2 servants and filled with steaming water scented with lavender and mint. "For your nerves," Meredith said, laying out soap and clean towels. "His Majesty's orders. He wants you calm and clear-headed before the proceedings begin." Alara bathed, letting the hot water ease tension from muscles that had been locked tight since she woke. When she emerged, Meredith helped her dress in a gown of deep gray wool, simple and well-made, with long sleeves that covered the healing wound on her arm. Her hair was braided and pinned in a crown around her head, sphere, an adult, nothing left loose to soften her face. She looked in the small mirror near the window and barely recognized herself. The girl who had knelt on the great hall floor 4 days ago, bleeding and broken, was gone. In her place was someone harder, older, someone whose eyes held things they had not held before. "You look strong," Meredith said. "That is what you need today. Strength." At midday, Aldrich came to collect her. The tribunal was being held in the great hall, the same space where the feast had been, though transformed now for a different purpose. The long tables had been cleared away, and replaced with a raised platform at the hall's center. On the platform sat a single chair for the accused. Arranged in a semicircle around it were 7 high-back seats, one for each PAC's representative. And behind those bench seating for witnesses already filling with PAC members who had come to see justice done or to defend their alpha, depending on their loyalties. 400 faces turned when Alara entered. She kept her chin up and her steps steady, following Aldrich to a bench near the front where she would sit until called to testify. Theron was already there, standing on a second platform to the right of the accused's chair, wearing formal black with the sigil of the Northern Crown embroidered in silver thread across his chest. He caught her eye as she sat, and something in his expression steadied her. "You can do this," his look said. "I am here." Garrick Blackwood was brought in under guard, his hands unbound, but his movements restricted by the 4 armed men who flanked him. He was dressed formally as well in the deep blue of Blackwood colors, his alpha pendant visible at his throat. He did not look at Alara as he was directed to the chair on the platform. Did not acknowledge her presence at all. That was fine. She did not need him to look at her. She needed him to hear what she was about to say. Theron stepped forward, and the hall fell silent. "We are convened," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the vast space, "under authority of the Northern Accord and the laws binding all 7 PACs. Garrick Blackwood of Blackwood PAC stands accused of willful harm to a PAC member, illegal use of silver compounds, and conspiracy to conceal debt through blood pact arrangement. These are capital offenses. The accused will have opportunity to answer. The council will vote. Justice will be served." He looked directly at Garrick. "How do you answer to these charges?" Garrick stood, his face composed, his voice steady. "Not guilty, Your Majesty, and I demand to know the source of these false accusations against my leadership and my honor." Theron's expression did not change. "The source is evidence Alpha Blackwood, and you will hear all of it before this day ends." He gestured to Aldrich. "Present your case." And the tribunal began. Aldrich rose from his seat near the witness benches, carrying the leather folder that had become familiar to Alara over the past days. He moved to the center of the hall with the unhurried precision of a man who had done this before, who knew that the evidence he carried would speak louder than any theatrical presentation. "I will present evidence in 3 categories," Aldrich said, his voice clear and factual. "Physical evidence of poisoning, financial documentation of illegal blood pact, and testimony regarding systematic abuse spanning 4 years. He opened the folder and removed the first item, the glass vial of dark liquid that Theron had shown Alara in the council chamber. He held it up so the assembled witnesses could see it clearly, the torchlight making the contents gleam like oil. This compound was found in Alpha Garrick Blackwood's private stores, stored in a locked cabinet in his personal chambers. Chemical analysis confirms it is an organic silver suspension point, 6 parts per million concentration, designed for oral administration. He set the vial on a small table that had been positioned near the accused's platform. Organic silver compounds have one primary use in werewolf medicine: suppression of wolf manifestation. They interrupt the neural pathways between human consciousness and wolf instinct. In therapeutic doses administered under medical supervision for specific conditions, they can be useful. In sustained doses given without consent or medical necessity, they are classified under the Northern Accord as willful harm. Aldrich produced a second document, this one covered in handwriting, that Alara recognized as the apothecary's script from Blackwood Keep's medical stores. These are purchase orders for silver compound, 11 transactions over 4 years, signed by Garrick Blackwood. The quantities total 47 vials, sufficient for daily dosing of one individual at maintenance levels for exactly 48 months. He placed the document next to the vial. Blood samples taken from Alara Blackwood 3 days ago showed 0.29 parts per million silver in her bloodstream. This is consistent with 4 years of daily exposure with dosing, stopped approximately 72 hours prior to testing. Murmurs rippled through the assembled witnesses. On the platform, Garrick's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Aldrich continued, methodical and relentless. "I now present testimony from Eleanor Ashton Pack, healer of Blackwood Pack for 13 years. An older woman stood from the witness benches, gray-haired and stern-faced, wearing the green robes that marked her as medical authority. She moved to stand beside Aldrich, her posture rigid with controlled anger. "Eleanor," Aldrich said, "were you ever consulted about administering silver compound to Alara Blackwood?" "No." Eleanor's voice was sharp as broken glass. "I was never asked, never informed, never given opportunity to assess medical necessity or provide supervision." "Did you ever treat Alara Blackwood for conditions that might warrant silver suppression therapy?" "I treated her twice. Once at age 14 for a broken wrist sustained during training. Once at age 15 for fever and respiratory infection. Neither condition warranted silver therapy. In fact, both times I examined her, her wolf responses were strong and healthy. She showed every indication of being a late shifter who would manifest normally within standard developmental windows. Yet she did not shift at 16. No, and when I inquired why, I was told by Alpha Blackwood that my services were no longer required for his daughter's care, that he had private physicians handling her case. Eleanor turned to look directly at Garrick, and the contempt in her face was absolute. I have been a healer for 31 years. I have treated hundreds of wolves. And I am telling this council that there was nothing wrong with Alara Blackwood that required silver suppression. What was done to her was not medicine. It was poison. She returned to her seat, and Aldrich moved to the next section of evidence. Financial documentation, he announced, producing the blood pact scroll that Alara had seen in the council chamber. He unrolled it carefully, revealing the dense text and red wax seals. This is a blood pact between Garrick Blackwood and Valerius Thorn, Enforcer, Lord of the Eastern Marches. Dated 3 years ago, witnessed and sealed according to traditional binding protocols. The loan amount is $2.3 million in gold. Repayment terms span 7 years with pack resources as primary collateral. He pointed to a specific section of text near the bottom. The secondary clause states that if Garrick Blackwood defaults on payment or if the arrangement is exposed to Crown authority before completion, Valerius Thorn's company gains legal right to mark all 400 members of Blackwood Pack for enforcement action. This includes women, children, and non-combatants. The murmurs grew louder. Several council representatives leaned forward in their seats, examining the scroll more closely as Aldrich held it up. This pact is illegal under Northern Accord law, Aldrich continued. Pact members cannot be used as collective collateral without individual consent. The penalty for such arrangements is rank removal and territorial forfeiture. He set the scroll on the evidence table. Alpha Blackwood had motive to keep this pact secret. Discovery would mean immediate loss of authority, but secrets require insurance. And the best insurance is a dependent pack member, too powerless to speak against you, too damaged to be believed if she tries. Aldrich's eyes moved to Alara. Which brings us to the third category of evidence, testimony regarding systematic abuse. Alara stood. Her hands were shaking, but she pressed them flat against her thighs and walked to the center of the hall. 400 faces watched her, 7 council representatives. Her father on the platform finally looking at her now, his face unreadable, and Theron standing to the side, his gray eyes steady on hers. Alara Blackwood, Aldrich said formally, you are not required to testify. The physical evidence is sufficient for conviction. But if you wish to speak, the council will hear you. Do you wish to give testimony? I do, Alara said. Her voice came out stronger than she expected. Then tell us in your own words what was done to you. Alara took a breath. Then she began. I was 16 when my father started giving me the tonic. He said I was defective, that my failure to shift meant something was wrong with my blood, that the medicine would help support my wolf until she was strong enough to emerge. She kept her eyes on the middle distance, not looking at anyone in particular, just speaking into the space. Every morning for 4 years I drank it. It tasted like metal and dirt, but I drank it because I believed him. I believed I needed it. I believed I was broken, and this was fixing me. Her hand moved unconsciously to her arm to the place where the silver burn was healing beneath the sleeve. When I made mistakes, I was punished. Whipping. Confinement in the basement for days at a time without food or light. Silver shackles on my wrists until the skin burned black. I thought I deserved it. I thought if I could just be better, work harder, cause less trouble, he would stop hurting me. Garrick stood abruptly. This is lies. The girl is mentally unstable from the failure to shift she has constructed. Sit down. Theron's voice cut across Garrick's like a blade. You will have your turn to speak. Right now you will listen. Garrick sat, but his face had gone red with rage. Alara continued steadier now. I have 47 scars on my back from whipping. I have burn marks on both wrists from silver shackles. I have been locked in a basement room with no food for up to 72 hours on multiple occasions. These are not fabrications. These are things that happen to my body. Anyone who examines me can verify them. She finally looked at her father. You told me I was worthless. You told me I was an embarrassment. You told me that if I could not shift, the least I could do was work hard and stay quiet and not shame you further in front of the pack. And I believed you. For 4 years, I believed every word. Her wolf surged in her chest, angry and protective and ready. But you lied. You poisoned me deliberately to keep me weak. You used me as insurance for your debt. You broke me so thoroughly that I would never have the strength to challenge you or tell anyone what you were doing. She took a step closer to the platform. I am not defective. I am not broken. You broke me, and I survived you anyway. Silence fell across the great hall. Absolute. Complete. Then one of the council representatives, an older woman from the Western Pack, spoke. Are there any witnesses who can corroborate the abuse described? Ilara turned toward the benches. Isolde and Seraphine Blackwood. My half-sisters. They saw. Two figures stood from the witness section. Isolde was pale, her hands twisted together. Seraphine's face was streaked with tears. We saw, Isolde said, her voice barely audible. We did not stop it. We were afraid, but we saw. Seraphine nodded, unable to speak. The council representative made a note on the parchment in front of her. Theron stepped forward. Alpha Blackwood, you have heard the evidence. You have heard testimony from your daughter, your pack healer, and your other children. How do you answer? Garrick stood again, and this time when he spoke, his voice was cold and controlled. I did what was necessary to protect this pack. The girl was unstable. The tonic was prescribed by private physicians. The discipline was appropriate for her failures. In the blood pact was a legal financial arrangement that is no one's business but mine. The blood pact used pack members as collateral without consent. Aldrich said, that is illegal. I am Alpha. The pack is mine to manage as I see fit. Not anymore. Theron's voice was final. The council will vote. Aldrich, present the charges for formal decision. Aldrich read from his notes. Willful harm through silver poisoning. Illegal blood pact arrangement. Systematic abuse of a dependent pack member. The recommended sentence is removal of Alpha rank territorial exile and transfer of pack authority to interim leadership under Crown supervision. The 7 council representatives conferred quietly among themselves. Then one by one they raised their hands. 7 votes. Unanimous. Guilty. Garrick's face went white, then red. Then he lunged toward Ilara with a speed that should not have been possible for a man his age. He did not make it 3 steps. Theron moved faster, intercepting Garrick mid-charge, catching him by the throat and lifting him off the ground with one hand. His eyes flashed yellow, his wolf rising to the surface, and his voice when he spoke was dual-toned and absolutely lethal. You will not touch her again. Ever. He threw Garrick back onto the platform. The guards moved in immediately, binding Garrick's hands with iron chains, this time no longer trusting him unrestrained. Theron turned to the council. The vote is recorded. Garrick Blackwood is stripped of rank, effective immediately. He is exiled from all 7 pack territories for life. Blackwood Pack will be placed under Crown stewardship with Isolde and Seraphine Blackwood serving as interim leaders for a period of 5 years. He looked at Ilara. You are free of him, permanently. Garrick was dragged from the hall, still shouting about injustice and lies and conspiracies. But his voice faded as the guards took him away, and then he was gone. 400 witnesses began to disperse, conversations breaking out in clusters, processing what they had just seen. Ilara stood in the center of the hall, shaking. Not with fear, with relief so profound it felt like her bones might dissolve. It was over. Theron crossed to her, moving slowly so she could see him coming. Are you all right? I do not know, Ilara said honestly. I think so. I think I will be. You were extraordinary. What you said, what you did, that took more courage than most warriors show in battle. I just told the truth. The truth is the hardest thing to tell when you have been taught to hide it. He offered his hand. Come. You need rest. The tribunal is finished, but there is more to discuss. About what happens next. About us. Ilara placed her hand in his, and the familiar electric jolt ran through her, stronger now than ever before. Her wolf surged toward him, desperate and certain. What happens next, she asked. Theron smiled, small but genuine. You heal. You learn to shift. You become who you were always meant to be, and I stand beside you while you do it. And then you decide about the mate bond, about being queen, about whether you want any of this or whether you need something different. But that decision is yours, Ilara. No one will make it for you ever again. He led her from the hall past the dispersing witnesses through corridors that felt different now. Lighter, less oppressive. The silver was leaving her blood. Her wolf was waking. Her father was gone. And for the first time in 4 years, Ilara Blackwood could breathe without the weight of poison in her lungs. She was free, and everything that came next would be her choice. 3 weeks passed like water finding new paths through stone. The silver continued to leave Ilara's system, measured every few days by Aldrich's careful testing. .29 became .18, became .07. The numbers declined steadily, and with each drop, Alara's wolf grew stronger. She felt it most acutely at night, lying in the soft bed in the guest wing while moonlight fell through the window. Her wolf would push against the thinning barrier, not trying to break through yet, but making her presence known. Warm, silver bright, patient in the way that predators are patient when they know their moment is coming. Theron came to see her every evening. Sometimes they talked sitting by the fire while he told her about the Northern Crown's territories, about the mountains and forests she would see when she was ready to travel. Sometimes they simply sat in silence, his hand holding hers, the mate bond, humming between them like a string pulled taut. He never pushed, never demanded, never made her feel as though she owed him anything beyond what she chose to give freely. On the 20th day after the tribunal, Aldrich came to her chamber with his testing kit and a thoughtful expression. .03, he announced after examining the blood sample. The silver in your bloodstream is nearly gone. What remains is in your bone marrow and connective tissue, and it will take another month to clear completely. But the suppression effect should be minimal now. He packed away his instruments and looked at her directly. Your wolf can shift if she wants to. The question is whether you are ready. Alara pressed her hand to her chest, feeling for that familiar presence. Her wolf responded immediately, surging forward with an eagerness that made Alara's breath catch. I think I am, she said, but I do not know how. His Majesty asked me to tell you that when you are ready, he will meet you in the eastern courtyard. He will help you through it. The courtyard was empty when Alara arrived at sunset. Stone walls on 3 sides opened to the forest on the 4th, with packed earth underfoot, and the smell of pine carried on the wind. Theron stood at the center, waiting. He had removed his coat and stood in just a shirt and trousers, looking more relaxed than she had ever seen him. You came, he said, when he saw her. Aldrich said you could help me shift. I can try, but the work is yours, not mine. I can only guide. He gestured to the ground in front of him. Sit. Face me. 6 feet of distance between us. Alara sat cross-legged on the cold earth. Theron mirrored her position, settling with the easy grace of someone completely comfortable in his body. Close your eyes, he said. Turn your attention inward. Find your wolf. Alara closed her eyes. In the darkness behind her eyelids, she reached for that silver presence in her chest. It was there, enormous and waiting so close now that she could feel individual aspects of it. Strength, speed, instinct older than language. She is there, Alara whispered. Good. Now listen to her. Feel what she wants. Do not try to control it. Just observe. What her wolf wanted was simple and overwhelming to emerge. To run, to howl under the open sky. To be whole after 4 years of being caged. And underneath all of that, threading through it like silver through stone to close the distance to Theron. To claim what was hers. She wants out, Alara said. She is pushing so hard. Let her push. Do not resist. Your body knows how to do this. Your wolf knows. The only thing stopping her is your fear. What if I cannot? You can. Theron's voice was absolutely certain. You are stronger than the poison that tried to break you. Trust yourself. Trust her. Alara took a breath and stopped fighting. Her wolf surged forward. Pain came first, immediate and total. Bones shifting, breaking, reforming, skin stretching, muscles tearing and reknitting. She heard herself make a sound, something between a scream and a growl, and distantly she was aware of Theron's voice speaking low and steady, anchoring her. Breathe through it. Let it happen. You are safe. I am here. The pain peaked, and then suddenly, shockingly, it was over. Alara opened eyes that saw differently now. Colors were muted, but shapes were sharper. Scents flooded her nose, overwhelming in their complexity. Pine and earth and stone, and Theron, his scent like winter storms and something wild she had no name for. She looked down at paws where her hands had been. White fur, large paws. She turned her head and saw a body that was hers and not hers, powerful and sleek and completely unfamiliar. She had shifted. Theron was smiling and there were tears on his face. He did not move from his seated position, but his hands were pressed flat to the ground as though grounding himself. There you are, he said, his voice rough. Alara, you are beautiful. She took a step toward him on unfamiliar legs, testing her balance. Then another, and then she was close enough to touch, and she pressed her muzzle against his shoulder. He wrapped his arms around her wolf form, buried his face in her fur, and held her like she was something precious he had thought he would never find. White wolf, he murmured. Silver eyes. You are Alpha Prime, 1 in 10,000. Do you understand what that means? She did not, but it did not matter. What mattered was this: she was whole, she was free, and she was choosing this man, this bond, this future, with a clarity she had never felt about anything in her life. Her wolf knew it. Had known it from the moment Theron carried her out of the Great Hall. Had been trying to tell her for weeks. Mate, ours, forever. 2 months later, under the full moon in the sacred grove, Elara Blackwood stood before 600 witnesses and claimed Theron Ashford as her mate. She wore white robes, her dark hair loose, her silver eyes bright with wolf light that never fully faded now. Theron removed his crown and set it aside, standing before her, not as king but as man. And when he spoke the ritual words, his voice carried to every corner of the ancient grove. I claim you, Elara, mate, equal, queen. The bond completed with a flash of golden light visible to everyone present. 600 wolves howled their approval, the sound rising into the night sky and echoing off the mountains. Elara howled with them, her voice joining Theron's two wolves singing the same song. She had survived poison and abuse and systematic destruction. She had testified against her father and watched him fall. She had shifted when everyone said she could not. And now she stood as queen beside a king who had searched for her for 3 years and would protect her for the rest of their lives. The girl who had been broken was gone. In her place stood a woman who had learned what the wolf inside her had always known: she was not the thing that broke. She was the thing that survived the breaking. And survival was not the same as weakness. It was the beginning of everything. 1 week after the mating ceremony, a raven arrived from the eastern reaches. Aldrich brought the message to the tower where Elara and Theron stood watching dawn break over the mountains. His face was troubled in a way Elara had never seen. What is it? Theron asked. Aldrich unrolled the parchment. From Morgana, the prophet. He read aloud, the prophecy you received was incomplete, Lycan King. I saw the silver wolf rise. I saw the mate bond form, but I also saw what comes after. He paused. When the white wolf claims her crown, the ancient shadow wakes. The old king returns, and the 7 packs will burn unless she remembers what she was before the poison made her forget. Silence fell across the tower. Elara's hand moved to Theron's. What does that mean? I don't know. Theron's jaw set. But we'll face it together. In the forest below, something moved in the shadows between the trees. Watching, waiting. Its eyes were older than the mountains.